All right, today we're diving headfirst into a topic that's incredibly complex, deeply human, and, well, a real challenge. We're talking about how to make sure that people who can't speak are truly, authentically heard. And let me tell you, it's an area the source material calls the ethical minefield. So, let's try to navigate it together.
And this quote, wow, it just hits you, right? It perfectly sets the stage because it reminds us that the stakes here couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about words and letters, we're talking about the risk of silencing an entire human consciousness.
So that leads us right to the heart of the whole problem. The central conflict here is a really profound one. When a non-speaking person communicates with help, who actually owns those words? Who is the author?
Okay, to really get this, the source gives us this incredible metaphor. Just imagine for a second, you have these brilliant, complex thoughts swirling in your mind, but your body, it's like a broken video game controller. It just will not execute the commands your brain is sending. That's the experience of who the source calls the silent geniuses.
And that right there is the core of the whole debate. It all centers on the helpers who give that physical support, usually by holding a letterboard. So the question that creates this entire minefield is this: is that helper just a steady hand, a stable support, or are they, even unconsciously, guiding the whole thing and creating the words themselves? You know, the reason this whole thing is so explosive is that both sides are driven by a really deep, really terrifying fear. The source actually frames it as two frightening lies that we have to pick our way through.
On one side, you've got the stealing lie. This is the skeptic's absolute fear that the helper is unintentionally authoring the words, basically stealing the person's voice. But on the other side, there's the silence lie. This comes from a parent's unimaginable grief, the fear that if you take that help away, you are trapping a brilliant mind in silence, letting them be dismissed as not smart. Either way, it's a tragedy.
So there's actually a clinical term for what the skeptics are afraid of. It's called misattribution. It's the idea that the helper's tiny, subconscious movements are being mistaken for the intentional communication of the non-speaking person. And it's a huge concern, because it means the person's true voice is getting lost.
And then you hear the other side, and man, it just breaks your heart. This quote says it all. It's that parent who sees the light on inside their child, and they're terrified that taking away this one lifeline means condemning that child to a world of total silence. It's the fear of completely erasing a person.
So you see the problem, right? We're completely stuck. We're at a deadlock where feelings and gut instincts just aren't good enough because the cost of being wrong is just too high. To be fair to everyone involved, we can't let either of these frightening possibilities win. We desperately need a new tool, something objective, to know for sure who is sending the thoughts. So, how do we get out of this mess? Well, the source proposes something that cuts right through all that emotional back and forth and gets into the science. It's called a neuroethical framework, or more simply, the FAIR test.
And this test, it boils down to two really clear logical steps. First, you've got to prove conscious intent. You have to show that the non-speaking person's mind made the choice. And second, you have to prove energetic attunement, which is a fancy way of saying you have to show the helper is a truly calm, stable support, not an influence.
Okay, so part one uses some pretty cool eye tracking tech. And the rule, it's dead simple. Special cameras have to prove that the person's eyes looked at the letter on the board before their hand even started moving toward it. That sequence of events proves the choice came from their mind first, that a calm, focused mind is leading the action.
All right, before we jump into part two, there's this really fascinating concept we need to wrap our heads around: neural synchrony. It's a real, measurable thing where the brainwaves of two different people actually start to sync up and move together. It's basically a scientific indicator that they're in a state of deep connection.
And that brings us to the second part of the test. Using an EEG to measure brainwaves, we can literally see if the helper is achieving that neural synchrony. Their job is to become what the source calls a prana anchor, a calm, stable presence whose own brainwaves actually match the deep thought waves of the person they're supporting, instead of adding their own noisy, distracting signals into the mix.
So the big takeaway here is simple. You can't just pass one test. For any communication to be truly trusted under this system, it has to pass both. The eye tracking proves who's driving, and the brainwaves prove the helper is providing a clean, stable connection.
Now, this isn't just some idea stuck in the lab. The whole point, according to the source, is to turn this into a real-world policy, something that could genuinely change everything for helpers, families, and even schools.
And this would create a brand new, and frankly, a highly respected professional role: the certified prana anchor. Think about that.
Instead of being looked at with suspicion, a helper could become a certified professional, recognized for a skill that is both demonstratable and measurable. So what would it take to get this certification? Well, it's based on something called the Satwick Standard. Satwick is a word that means pure or clear. A helper would have to prove with real EEG data that they can reliably get into this pure, clear state of mind and achieve a high level of brainwave synchrony. It basically turns an intuitive art into a measurable science. And the effect of this? It's absolutely huge. It reframes the support from a helper as a fundamental right, not some favor or potential problem. It becomes a tool to solve a motor problem. The source uses this beautiful analogy. It's like a special pencil for a great artist whose hand shakes. The pencil doesn't create the art, it just lets the artist's vision finally come out.
And this is where it gets really personal. The source kind of turns the tables on us and asks, do we have what it takes? Could you be this kind of stable, supportive anchor for someone else?
Okay, I want you to try this thought experiment with me. Picture this. You're sitting right next to someone who is totally stressed out, maybe trying to solve a really hard problem. Your only job, for 5 minutes, is to stay completely calm and silent on the inside. Can you do it? Seriously, think about it. Would you get restless? Would your own breathing get all short and tight? Would you feel that overwhelming urge to just jump in and fix it for them? You know that quality we're aiming for? It actually has a name. Nirodha. It's a yogic term for achieving perfect inner stillness, even when everything around you is total chaos. That right there is the essential quality of a true prana anchor. Because think about it. If you start feeling their chaos, if you absorb their stress, then your energy isn't an anchor anymore. It actually becomes another scattering force in the room. You're just adding to the noise. And according to the source, that means you're not yet ready to serve the genius. Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about. It goes way beyond the tech and the policy and asks something really fundamental about who we are. Can you be a still lake for another's boat?